12 lines from the top of the Amid. The Gemara just established that Rav Paskins Hishitas Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to Muksa, and we were specifically focusing on the concept of Migu, the Iskatsoi Lebein Hashmashes. According to Rabbi Yehuda, is Iskatsoi Lekula Yoima, unlike Rab Shimon that disagrees with this type of Muksa. And the core of Daf Memhei is going to clarify Shitas Rabbi Shimon. As we'll see, Rab Shimon holds that when an item is useful, it's not Muksa. Actually, we're going to see there's going to be a Havamina that Rab Shimon only will consider an item Muksa if it was both Huksa Lemitzvasai. If something was designated to be used as a mitzvah, the example is our topic of a Neir of Shabbos. In other words, when the candle is lit, Rab Shimon says you may not use the oil. That oil was designated for a mitzvah. And Huksa Le'isurai. Huksa Le'isurai means is that when the candle is lit, you may not remove the oil from the lamp, whether it touches on the concept of mechaber. We're going to have also the concept as we're going to have on next daf memvav that there is a basis issue over here, and the question will be whether Rab Shimon needs both reasons to render something muksa, or whether huksa limitzvasai even Rab Shimon is enough to designate something muksa during the time that it is huksa limitzvasai. Now we're going to have a debate who Rebbe Paskins like, as we'll see in our daf today, whether Rebbe Paskins like Rabbi Yehuda or like Rab Shimon. We're going to have a question whether Rabbi Yechanan Paskins like Rabbi Yehuda or like Rab Shimon, which will be something that will not be clarified. That's going to be in the beginning of the next daf. Bottom line will be is that if something is intrinsically unfit, even Rab Shimon will agree that that item will be muksa. If something is inherently fit, it's not so as we keep on saying that Rab Shimon lays lay muksa. We're going to have great examples today in which it will become clear where Rab Shimon is going to be a lot more lenient than the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Without any further ado, Chevra can daf memhei amud aleph, 12 lines from the top of the amud. Says the Gemara, Boy minei Reish Lakish ben Rabbi Yechanan. And the question was asked, Bishitas Rab Shimon. Chitim shezuran bekarka. If you have grains that were planted in the ground, we're speaking obviously about grains that Bechlal did not yet start to rot. So they are completely usable, but they were designated to be, to germinate. It's a great example that you set it aside from it being used, but it's still useful. Or similarly, beitzim shetachas tarnagoyles. If you placed eggs under a hen to incubate, but the eggs did not yet begin to incubate, they are inherently fit, but they were set aside from being used. According to Rab Shimon, mahu. In other words, how lenient is the sheet of Rab Shimon? Ki leis leil Rab Shimon mutza. He doesn't have this broader application that's only heicha deloy dachya biyadayim. As long as you did not actively set aside something from being used, that is where Rab Shimon says it's not muksa. But in our two examples, in the inquiry cases, the wheat, the egg, here you actively set it aside. You planted it in the ground. You put it under the hen. Then even Rab Shimon islay muksa. In other words, if something is inherently useful, Rab Shimon will not consider it muksa, even though you actively set it aside. So Rabbi Yechanan responds, Amalei, ein muksa le Rab Shimon, elo shemen shebeneir. This will be the ground zero example, our case, when you have oil in the lamp, b'shashu doilek, only while the lamp is still aflame on Shabbos. And now, guys, the girsa is of utmost importance. We're going to read one way of reading the girsa here. Hoyel, that you have both factors. Hukza lemitzvasi. Hukza lemitzvasi means that while the lamp is being lit, the oil is designated for it to be used for the mitzvah of Atlakas Neder Shabbos Kodesh. And hukza li'isurai, while it's lit, like we mentioned, there is an issue of Shema Yechava. There is an issue that the lamp is a basis l'davar ha'asud. So only when you have both reasons together, only then does Rab Shimon hold that the item is muktzah. Other than that, like in the cases that you are asking, even though there was a dechiyah biyadayim, but these items lit up Shimon will not be muktzah. That is what Rabbi Yochanan responded. Now, he asks the Gemara, you need both Hutzah l'mitzvasei and Hutzah l'yisurai. Whoa, no, can't be. Trek the Gemara, but lay Hutzah l'mitzvasei alone being a reason for an item, even lit up Shimon, to be muktzah. We're going to jump ahead to Masechta Sukkah. And here we have a Braisa, which elaborates a din that we also have in a Mishnah there. That once the Sukkah is properly covered, so you have yourself a kosher Sukkah. And on top of that, you are fulfilling the concept of Noye Sukkah. You are adorning your Sukkah. For examples, the Mishnah gives, the Braisa gives. The Itra, the Keramim, you adorned it with colored cloths. Or ubesadinim hamitzayarim, or with embroidered linens, and the tolaba and goizim you hung from the schach nuts, afarsikim, peaches, shkedim, almonds, rimonim, pomegranates, aparkile shalanovim, clusters of grapes, atore shalshubalim, wreaths of grain, yenois shmanim musalatis, wine, oils, and flour. Chedra, you don't hang wine; it means jugs that have in them these items. Says the B'raisa that since they were hung for Noye Sukkah, Asur Listapik Mehem Ad Mutsoy Yom Tov, until after Yom Tov, you cannot take any benefit from it. However, Ve'im Hisna Lehem, if you stipulated that, as we'll learn in Masechta Sukkah with all the details, stipulated before Yom Tov, before Bein Hashmashos, that even though you hung it from the schach, you are not removing the option of you taking it for your own benefit. Because if you make such a verbal stipulation, then it's not exclusively Hutzah l'mitzvasei, and then you're good. That stipulation is effective. Now, on the premise that the Braisa follows Shitas Rab Shimon, on that premise, we have a kasha. There was no isur here. Eloma, it was designated for a mitzvah. Yet, the Braisa says that you may not use it until the end of the Yom Tov. So the Gemara counters, indeed, this Braisa clearly does not subscribe to the concept that Rabbi Yochanan, as we understood him having said, that let Rab Shimon, you have to have both factors to make something muktzah. Both Hutzah l'mitzvasei and Hutzah l'yisurei. But the Braisa is not authored by Rab Shimon. Says the Gemara, Umimai de Rab Shimoni. How do you know it's Rab Shimon? Because the Tana, Rab Chia bar Yosef kamei de Rab Yochanan. Here we're quoting a second Braisa. Now Rashi points out that the first Braisa that we quoted was taught in the Braisas of Rab Chia and Rab Oishia. They were the ones that whatever they taught, even though it's a Braisa, that's mamish authoritative. So we begin always, when you want to quote, the best Braisa to quote from is any Braisas that were taught by Rab Chia and by Rab Oishia. What we're teaching right now was taught by Rab Chia bar Yosef. Okay, but here it's clear Rab Shimon. It's not as good as the Braisas of Rab Chia and Rab Oishia. If you have no option, you can make them corrupted. There was a mistake, or there's a chasura mechsera. But let's now read the second Braisa. It says in this Braisa of Rab Chia, the Braisa is beginning not to speak about a sukkah, We're speaking about not the mitzvah of sukkah. We're speaking here about a hut, as we'll see when we learn this in the Masechta Sukkah. And the hut collapsed, fell apart on Yom Tov. Can I take a beam of this collapsed hut for my use? This is not about Hutzah l'mitzvasei. In other words, here is that anything that when Yom Tov began was part of a structure, so that was not muchan, right? It was designated to be part of a building. So that automatically remains muktzah to use for yourself during Yom Tov. However, if you had a hut and right around the hut you had certain pieces of wood, but they were not interwoven, they were not nailed in, they were not mechuber to the hut, even though the owner left it adjacent to the hut, that's not considered designated for the hut because it wasn't part of the hut. That's the first line, that you can't take wood from a hut that collapsed. You want to take wood to use for your sukkah, because the hut in the beginning of the Yom Tov was a hut, only from woods that were near it, that are not considered part of. Here the Braisa clearly adds that the Tana Rab Shimon will allow you to take wood from the hut after it collapsed. Or really in Masechtas Beitza, we're going to have this Braisa with another very important nuance. And even let Rab Shimon, if you remember, we just learned a few daf ago that if you have a very big lamp, a lamp that's, it's a bowl, and when you lit it Friday, you thought it's going to burn the whole Shabbos. Even Rab Shimon holds that if it got extinguished during Shabbos, the oil is mutzah, because you had no idea, but you set it aside, it should be a lamp. You had no idea that it might be useful. By a candle, by the ner, since the ner, that's the ner, it's little, you knew it's going to be extinguished during Shabbos. That is what Rab Shimon holds, that after it's extinguished, you can make benefit from the little remaining oil. So the Gemara in Beitz is also going to clarify that if the hut was a sturdy hut, and you, before Yom Tov, thought the hut is going to stand, then even Rab Shimon is moida that if it happened to collapse, that's already called muktzah. Because it was built in something else, and you had no idea that you'll be able to use it. If the hut was rickety, you knew prior to Yom Tov that there's a possibility, the owner anticipated that possibility that it might collapse. Here is where Rab Shimon is lenient. Now this, my friends, is the shavin. This is only if it was a hut that collapsed. But what happens if you have Sukkah A collapsed, and now you want to use parts of Sukkah A into Sukkah B, the shavin, the Sukkah Sachag, Bechag. Oh, and if you built it into a Sukkah, that's called Huktzah Limitzfasai. Even though the Sukkah was rickety, even though the owner anticipated the possibility of it collapsing, even Rab Shimon will be Vaida, Shehi Asura. And Asura means not only may you not use it on Yom Tov, my friends, you may not even use it on Chol HaMoed. Because if you had a sukkah built as Yom Tov came in, even with Rab Shimon, this Huktzah L'mitzvasai is a muktzah. And here again, the im hisnala hakol lefitanoi. This really goes on the Tanakama, but the kasha of the Braisa here, the Braisa that's taught, the Braisa that's taught by Reb Chia Bar Yosef, clearly quotes Shitas Rab Shimon that concurs that Huktzah L'mitzvasai will be muktzah. So, gosh, again, how can you, Rabbi Yechanan, say that the only time Rab Shimon will consider something muktzah if it has both factors, Huktzah L'mitzvasai, the Huktzah L'Yisurai? That's not correct. And indeed, we clarify even Rabbi Yechanan. Says the Gemara, but Rabbi Yechanan really answered concerning the wheat that was planted, concerning the eggs that were put under the hen, that the only time something will be muktzah is if it was Huktzah L'mitzvasa. It's the psak of Rabbi Yechanan we understood. Let Rab Shimon, a person will be allowed to take out those grains and to eat them. There was a dechia biyadayim. Wow, doesn't matter. It wasn't Huktzah L'mitzvasa, no issue. If something is Huktzah L'mitzvasa, then it becomes Huktzah L'Isurai, and only then will Rab Shimon, right, be machmir and consider it muktzah. Great. Okay, so what are we having over here? Okay, it wasn't as lenient as we understood initially, but still we have a huge psak din. In other words, what becomes clear that if something is inherently useful, imagine you planted it, you placed the egg under the hen. It means you did something biyadayim, which indicated that you don't plan to eat it. You want this to become a chiclet. You can change your mind and take it on Shabbos. Imagine, you can take it on Yom Tov. There's no muktzah because it wasn't like the shemen shebener. Itmanami Amar Rab Chia bar Abba Amar Rab Yechanan. Another quotation of Rabbi Yechanan, Ein muktzah l'Rab Shimon elo ki ein shemen shebener, which is the case of our sugya. In other words, and noch shemen shebener only while the lamp is lit. The shah shehu doilek while it's burning. While imagine, even only while it's burning. Hoil v'huktzah l'mitzvasai. Therefore, huktzah li'isurai. Okay. And only while it's huktzah l'mitzvasai. That's another nuance. In other words, when you lit a lamp, you knew, not a bowl, a lamp, you knew it's going to go out sometime during Shabbos. So you knew that the mitzvah is only going to last for 3 hours. And a chanami. After the 3 hours, lit up Shimon, befedish, you can use the oil. During the time that it's hutzah l'mitzvasai, during that time, you may not use the oil. But that means, on the other hand, for example, what happens if some of the oil drips out? While the lamp is burning, you can't use that oil. Because this is in the time period that it's hutzah l'mitzvasai. Says the Gemara, another qualification that explains the lenient sheet of Rab Shimon, even when someone is hutcha b'yodayim, even if you actively set out something from it being used, you do the opposite of muchad. It won't always be muksa. Now, guys, like this, Groigeris was speaking about it was common for people to take their figs and grapes and to put them out. They would put them out on the rooftops, but it doesn't have to be on the rooftop. They would put it in the sun and it would become dried out, and they would make dried figs or raisins. Now, what's unique about figs and grapes is that while it's being dried out during that time, it's mamish inedible. So it's edible when it's a fig. You put it out. So first of all, you put it out to dry. That means you set it. You're not going to use it. You put it out to dry. On top of the fact that you put it out to dry, that means you did an action which indicates that you're not going to eat it the way it is. You want to wait for something else to happen to it. On top of that, during the time that it's not fully dried out, it's not considered edible. Only then does Rav Shimon say that you may not eat it, because you have both of these factors. Gewaldig. Okay. Asks the Omida Achrina, loy, is if I set aside other fruit items that could be eaten while they're being dried out. Now, again, guys, it doesn't mean that these figs are completely inedible. There's different levels, but we consider it, unlike the other ones, a lot more inedible. Only there, other fruits that during their dried out process, even though you set it aside, you were maktzia it, hutcha b'yodayim, if it's inherently useful, mamish like the case of the question that we began today with. You planted seeds in the ground. You put an egg under a hen. You set it aside, but right now it's usable. It's not muktzah. Or the Gemara is asking, 1 second, that's a big chiddush. But V'hatanya says in the Braisa, if a person is eating figs, and he has leftovers, and the hell on legag, so he decides, the leftovers, I'm not hungry now, I'm going to put it out to dry. I want to wait for them to become dried figs. Or similarly, if a person was eating grapes, and just for example, so you're not eating anymore. And the hell on the gag, had all of this happened prior to Shabbos, and you put it out there, for them to become raisins. Now, guys, we already know that Rab Shimon does not hold that nigudis katsoy lebein hashmashes. He doesn't hold. He is katsoy lekulu yomin. After it's ready, after this product is properly dried out, of course you can eat it. That we know. The topic is, can you change your mind prior to it being fully ready? You mamish wanted it to, and it's not even that edible. So says, again, we're quoting over here, Abraisa, dafke figs. He begins with figs and grapes. Lo yoichel ache yasmin. In other words, if he designates prior to Shabbos, he states that I intend to eat them even before they're ready. If he made that statement, then he can eat it. If he didn't make that statement, he cannot eat it. Now, the Chiddush, we'll see, this is even Abshem. The problem is, and the same thing will be, if other fruits, if you put out peaches, or chavushim, or quinces, or b'sharmine peiros. And again, just a mitzias is that all other items other than figs and grapes, halachically, are considered edible enough even before they're ready, even before they're dried out. So now the Gemara wants to understand, Mari, who is the author of this Braisa? If it's going to be the Tana Rebbe Yehuda, even if you didn't do an action that shows that you're not going to be using it, still Rabbi Yehuda subscribes to this broader application of Muktzah. So we don't need to have a Braisa quoting Rabbi Yehuda in a scenario where you are doichet b'yodayim. So the whole case l'chura is only needed l'tana Rab Shimon. And the problem is that here we see that only one factor is needed. The one factor of me setting it aside, deciding prior to Shabbos, I'm not going to use it until it's ready. You don't need the additional factor that it's not edible. Answers the Gemara, no, you're not. He stands. Rab Shimon is not that lenient. Dichud b'yodayim be itself, if the item is useful, is not muktzah. And the Braisa is authored by the Tana Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, why do I even need this case? Answers the Gemara, because it's food. In other words, you're eating it. And you're eating, like that was the case. When I eat something, even though now I'm satisfied, if I eat from a bowl, from a box, that in itself should be muchan. I plan to eat from it. So you would think that even if you did not explicitly say that I will eat from it even before it's fully ready, maybe the action of eating from it, even though I ate from it before I put it on the roof, I know that. But that's the chiddush, kamash molam, that keep it the helm lagag, that once you've let them out to dry, asuchei askel adapteminayu, that you don't intend to eat from it, and therefore, let Rabbi Yehuda, even other fruits that are not spoiled while they are in middle of drying, let Rabbi Yehuda, they are muktzah. But according to Rab Shimon, we stand our ground, which is gaval, which is the huge leniency. Let Rab Shimon actively setting something aside does not make something muktzah. Wow, as long as it is inherently fit for use. Gaval, that's big. Last line in the Amid. Zok the Gemara boy minei Rab Shimon bar Rebbe. Right, one of the sons of Rebbe, Rab Shimon, asked of his father, "May Rebbe daf mem hey Amid beis epetzile tomorrow? What's going to be the din regarding eating unripe dates?" Now, just to know like this, that many fruits, here we're focusing on a date, they never become fully ripe on the tree. The system is that they reach a certain level, you have to harvest them. Here they would store them in certain baskets, and in the baskets, they would at a certain time later become fully ripe. So he asked his father, L'shita Rab Shimon, are you allowed, no, it's the nut, you gather them, you put them in the basket, okay, no, it's, you are waiting for them to become ready, but when Shabbos came in, or even right now, let Rab Shimon, it's not important Shabbos came in, right now it's not fully edible, can you eat it? And Rabbi Vaiti said, Amalei aim muktzah Rab Shimon elo groi spitzimukin bulvat. In other words, I know that these dates are not fully edible, but it's not only about not being fully edible. What did we say on Amud Aleph? That muktzah Rab Shimon dafka needs two factors. It's inherently, now by the way, there's many levels of inedible. We're going to see that something that's mamish considered inedible, something that's not food, even Rab Shimon will be muktzah. Saying that they dried out, even the tzimukin and the groigeris, it's not edible, but the question is whether you can eat it. That means it's somewhat edible. These dates are somewhat edible, but they're not considered fit for everyone. And even though they're not fit, since you did not set it aside, by the case of the figs, you put it on the roof to dry. So you have two factors. Not only is it not edible, but you set it aside. B'yodayim. Here, fakir, putting them in the basket is not setting it aside from it being used. Putting it in the basket is doing the last thing that you can do to make it edible. So even though it's not yet fit, you can eat it when it's still not yet fit, because you don't have the first factor of setting it aside. Now, the presumption of the Gemara now will be is that since Rebbe is clarifying the shita of Rebbe Shimon, means he paskins like Rebbe Shimon. Based on that, says the Gemara, the Rebbe leislei muktzah. Rebbe does not. Does Rebbe concur with Rab Shimon? Because the Havamina would be that if Rebbe himself would not hold of that shita, either the son wouldn't have asked the question of his father, or his father would tell him, don't eat it. I mean, he gave a very lenient psak din. He's saying that you can eat on Shabbos these dates, even though they're not ripe fully. Problem is, v'hatnan. A Mishnah and Beitzah. Mishnah says that's the end. Ein mashkin b'shechtan as amid bar yois. This is about Yom Tiv. Now on Yom Tov, we are allowed to shecht animals. However, there are certain animals that we consider them to be muktzah. Why? Because they don't live together in the area where people are living. So there are animals that are called baisois, from the word bias. You have animals that are called midbariyos. In English, it's called range animals. That since they don't live with the owner, they live out there in the wild, even though they are owned by people. Now, balachayim are muktzah. An animal is not considered muktzah if you own it. And since you are allowed to shecht on Yom Tov, so when you own animals that are with you, none of those animals are muktzah. Okay, they're muchan. But if the animal is considered a midbariyos type of animal, then it's considered muktzah. So the Mishnah says, ein mashkin b'shecht and asam midbariyos. Now the Gemara there says that milsa agav urcha kamashmalon. The mashkin means that when you would slaughter an animal, one of the techniques, this is just a practical technique, to make the skinning of the animal easier is giving the animal a lot of water prior to the shechita. In the Beis Hamikdash, it says that Shlomo HaMelech would make the troughs of water that was given to all of the animals of Kachim out of gold. Ein anius b'makom ashirus. So the issue is not that much about the mashkin. The issue mainly is about shechting. Can you shech? So midbariyos animals, range animals, are considered muktzah because you had no intent to use them on Yom Tov. And if they did show up, they're muktzah. Avol mashkin b'shecht and asabaisis, because one is allowed to shecht on Yom Tov. Now, how do you define the range animal? So we have all those opinions over there. And Vitanya, we learn to clarify what's a domesticated animal, what's considered a range animal. If they leave your shelter already in the beginning of spring, and they are out there for all of their hot months where they don't need the protection that you provide for them, then they only return during the first rain season, which is in the month of Mar Cheshvan. So they are spending the bulk. First of all, it's the roiv of the months of the year. And they only come back because they need to have a roof over their head when it's too cold or rainy. That is the Chachamim's definition of range. They live in the midbariyos. And baisois, kol sheyoitzois v'rois, even chutz l'tchum, a domesticated animal doesn't mean an animal that's living within the tchum. I don't care that during the day it goes outside of the tchum, even if it goes outside the tchum, as long as u'ra'os v'lanois b'seichat tchum, as long as at night it comes to sleep within the tchum, that's called baisos. That is the sheet of the Chacham. Rebbe Omer elu ve'elu baisos. Even the ones that are not with you for the majority of the year, they come sometimes. That's called baisos. They graze in the pasture. They live out there. They never come home. And the Rebbe used to quote this. Al-Pi Hasidus, we're speaking about Yidden, that there's a concept that we call an Achas Bashana Jew. Some people refer to that term in a derogatory way. God forbid. That Jew only comes on Yom Kippur. That's amazing. That's a proof that we have a soul. Why would a Jew come to shul if he doesn't come the rest of the year? If you even come home once, it means you're baisois, you're in. The midbariyos is only if you never come home. But they say, coming back over here. So what do we see over here? I want to make it clear, Chavra, that a range animal, that's what we're learning. What did we just learn right now? According to Rav Shimon, if something is inherently fit, you know what? Even if you were matzia it, if it's not huktzah mitzvah, if it's not huktzah isid, you got no problem. According to Rav Shimon, range animals are not muktzah. Why would they be muktzah? You are allowed to shecht on Yom Tov. The animals are fit to be slaughtered. Yeah, you had no intent. And even if you push them out, let's begin with that. So, l'cho'ura, this whole din is only l'shitas Rabbi Yehuda. So here we have a Stam Mishnah. We have Nach Rebbe defining the Stam Mishnah. All of that is Bishitas Rabbi Yehuda. Again, Rebbe never explicitly said he paskins like Reb Shimon. Rebbe in Beitza never said explicitly that he paskins like Rabbi Yehuda. But the presumption is that when you begin to explain and to clarify a shita of a Tana, if you don't paskin like him, then why would you do that? So who does Rebbe paskin like? And the Gemara does not have any conclusive solution. But the point is, there's no contradiction. You have no idea. Either you can say, Hani nami kegroigris v'tzimuk and damyan. So you can argue that since the owner drove them away, how did they become midbariyos? Going back to our metaphor to a yid. Why do you think a yid is not coming to shul? You think it's his fault? Not that, God forbid, anyone did anything b'mezid, but he was driven away. Something happened that made him uncomfortable. So number one, you drove the animal to make it a midbariyos. We're speaking about domesticated animals. We're speaking about cattle, sheep, goats. Number two, here's the word. That the very fact that once animals are range animals, you have to make a big effort to bring them back. They don't come back anymore. It's like an item that's inherently unfit. We do have both factors. A, you drove them away. B, they are inherently unfit because how would you bring them back other than making this big effort? So first of all, I can argue that Rab Shimon agrees that midbariyos are muktzah. If you're going to deny that, you can't say it's not inherently unfit. It's fit, but it's hard for the gavra to go get it. Don't confuse the gavra and the chefs. Fine. So Iba is saying that when Rab Shimon, the Rebbe, asked his father, Bishitas Rab Shimon, and that was the top line of the Amid, Li Rab Shimon. When you ask your father, what will Rab Shimon hold, and he tells you what Rab Shimon holds, how does it show that he paskins like him? I mean, clearly he said, this is what Rab Shimon will hold. That the dvar of the Rab Shimon Karmelei, but maybe Rebbe, the lay, Rebbe doesn't hold like Rab Shimon. Or in the reverse, the fact that Rebbe in Masechtas Beitza is going into details, how do you define midbariyos? How do you define bisos? Doesn't prove, and let's assume that whole din is only l'shitas Rabbi Yehuda Seder, because according to Rab Shimon, these animals that are range animals are not muktzah. So what? In other words, that midbariyos are muktzah. So Rebbe Bichlal defines midbariyos in a much more limiting way. But to begin with, ulididi leis le muktzah at all, even for animals that are considered midbariyos. So he tells them lididchu oidali, even according to you, mias the hechad the yotzes b'pesach. But they do come back every now and then, especially in the case that you gave, and across is the revia, that they come back already by the rain season. The Baiso is Nino, and the Rabbanan Amrilei know that they are considered midbariyos. That for an animal to be considered a domesticated animal, it has to come back more often than only seasonal. It has to come back, like the way he says, it comes back to sleep. Does it mean every night? I don't know, but it has to be a lot more often. Okay, so bottom line is that with yesterday's daf, we concluded that the Rav paskins like Rabbi Yehuda. Now we're making it clear that we don't know who Rabbi paskins like. And the third question is Shitas Rabbi Yechanan, which is really you can say the counter of Rav. Rav was the leader in Babel. Rabbi Yechanan was the leader of Eretz Yisrael. Omar Rabba Bar Chana Omar Rabbi Yechanan. Now look at the wording. Amru. Amru means he's quoting what they said in the yeshiva. That's a very important statement, because when you have this great leader, the Paisik here, they said, you can mamash touch it both ways. They said means not me, or it's not only me, everyone. Amru, they say halacha Rab Shimon, and the presumption will be that the fact that Rabbi Yechanan is quoting what they say in the yeshiva means he agrees. So here again, Rabbi Yechanan holds like Rab Shimon, which the Gemara counters at me. Rabbi Yechanan hachi, no. Oh boy, minei ahusava. Keruya, there was the Keruyan of a village. The elder of Keruyan posed the following inquiry. And again, Tosfos Chulin Daf Vav, I think, says that whenever the Gemara speaks about an elder, normally it refers to Eliyahu Navi. So whenever it was not Eliyahu Navi, you give another, not the elder, but the elder, the Keruyan elder. Or other people say the Siruyan elder from another city. Bottom line is, this was the inquiry. Ki nosho talni goyles, a movable, a portable chicken coop. Wow. Now let me explain something. We keep on saying that Balachayim Shabbos, Balachayim are muktzah. Here we're going into the topic of buses. That will be a great build-up, which will continue on Daf Mem Vav, regarding what's the issue with a nair that has a lamp. Is it because Shema Yechaba, which is what Rashi said in the beginning of the Sugya, Or as we'll see, at the end of Daf Vav, no. Rab Shimon cannot be afraid of Shema Yechava, it's a Gemaldik Echab, because Rab Shimon holds that Dover She'ein is Chavin is Mutar. It's such a great idea. In other words, what happens if I move a lamp without intent of putting it out? And it went out. According to Rab Shimon, I did nothing wrong. Dover She'ein is Chavin is Mutar. So we're going to see, I'm saying, building up the conclusion, the reason why you may not move a lamp with Rab Shimon while the nail is burning is because of buses. So here a chicken coop is a base for the chayalech, for the chickens, for the birds that are in there. If it's a fixed coop, you can't move it. It's karka. If it's portable, can you move it? All right. Now, on my lay, Rabbi Yochanan responds, Klum asui elo l'tanagoyim. This was only made for tanagoyim. Tanagoyim are bar chai. Balichayim are muksa. Balichayim are inherently muksa. And therefore, no, you cannot use it. Okay. Now, by the way, that's even with Rab Shimon. Everything we learned today is items that are intrinsically useful. For that, to make it muksa, you have to have the two conditions. Something that's inherently muksa is muksa. And now we're going to go to the din of a buses. This movable, this portable coop is a bus. So the Gemara says, hold on. Not so simple. Dr. Shaidim explained. Rab Shimon will not subscribe to that. Why not? Rab Shimon subscribes to the concept of buses. Because when you have a lamp, when you have something that the prohibited part is inanimate, it's a diamond. If it's there, it's there. We spoke a few shiurim ago about, the plate under the candles, how you have to make it a buses to a davar ha'asad and to a davar ha'mutir. I don't know if it was on the Chabad-Lubavitch, but it was on the Zoom later. Here's the upside of chickens is that chickens constantly go in and out. That's what the Rishonim add. Since we also learned this a few daf ago when we had that basket, something that goes in and out, they're not always going to be there. They're not always going to be there, then it's not so simple to say that this becomes a buses for something that's prohibited. Because from the beginning, you knew sometimes chickens will be in it and sometimes they won't be in it. And that's why this Chumrah, the Psak Din, only fits for Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Shimon, it should not be muktzah. Not even mitzad buses, because the very fact that they go in and out, that's the word. So again, how? So what's the problem? He paskin that it's muktzah. This Psak Din L'chura only fits for Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yochanan quoted Amru halacha ki Rabbi Shimon. So who does he paskin like? So the Gemara says it must be hachbamayaskinan that the chicken coop is not only made for living chickens. Hoyel the isbei efroyach meis. And a chiclet, a efroyach, that's maize, a human being may not eat it halachically. A dog will not eat it. And by the way, Rashi points out that according to Rab Shimon, a nevela is not muksa. A nevela is not muksa. So that's very important. A nevela is not muksa. Let Rab Shimon, if at least prior to Shabbos, you knew that this animal might die. It's a misukenes. So you knew that, listen, you can't shacht on Shabbos. But from the beginning, you knew that if it's going to die, there's something you can use it for, and you can take it and you can cut it up and feed it to the dogs. But an item that was edible prior, so you did not intend at all to feed it to the animals, and now it died on Shabbos. That's the word. Since it was unfit l'klavim prior to Shabbos, even Rab Shimon will hold that it's muktzah. And by the way, not everyone agrees to that. So the Gemara says, hold on. I understand that portable chicken coops also have in them these little chicklets, right, that are dead. And therefore, they don't move in and out. So yes, it becomes a buses, l'davar ha'asad. But hani chalamar, barameimar, that holds the Shmei de Rava, that says, moida hoyer Rab Shimon b'balechayim, shemesu, sha'asurim. Very good. However, and by the way, why would that be? I'll tell you why that would be. Let me just go back to the large lamp. We said that if you have a very large lamp, if when Shabbos came in, your presumption was this lamp is going to be burning the whole Shabbos, we learned above, Rab Shimon will consider it muksa. What did we learn today? That if you have a hut, if it was not rickety, that was the nuance we just quoted from Masechtas Beitza, and it collapsed on the Shabbos or on Yom Tiv, Rab Shimon will also hold you can't make use of the wood. It was huksa l'mitzvah. If a sukkah collapsed, right now it's not a mitzvah, because if something in your mind was completely not going to be fit, then it remains that way for the remaining of Shabbos. And you can argue the same thing over here. This animal prior, you didn't have any, you didn't see the possibility of you using it because it was alive. Now that it died on Shabbos, he's quoting Shitas Rab Shimon that it remains awesome. And now the chicken coop, the portable chicken coop, becomes a basis for that issue. The name, his name was Mar Rabbi Yosef, who quotes Rava, saying the opposite. Now it's edible to animals. Now you can feed it to the dogs. Rab Shimon will hold, that it's mutarin. So Ma'ikal Meimar, again, the fact that Rabbi Yechanan paskin that the chicken coop is not okay, that's a chirarai that he paskins like Rabbi Yehuda. So again, the Gemara says, no, that chicken coops, here the portable one, also having them eggs that were born on Shabbos, born on Yom Tiv. And that will be talking at the beginning of Masechtas Beitza. If something is called Noilad, it didn't even exist before Shabbos or Yom Tiv, it's Muksa. But here again, my friends, hold on. That will be a big question. Does Rab Shimon subscribe to Noilad? Again, depends. But didn't Rav Nachman already tell us, as we'll learn in the beginning of Beitza, Man de Isle Muksa, which is Rabbi Yehuda and all the Tanoim that concur with Rabbi Yehuda, the broader application of Muksa, they also subscribe to the Muksa that we call Noilad. But the Tanoim, Beroisham Rabbi Shimon, the Leisle Muksa, Leisle Noilad. So again, if based on the presumption that Rabbi Yechanan paskins like Rab Shimon, the fact that it's a basis to chickens, not considered a basis l'davar ha'asir. Yes, Rab Shimon is moida that Balei Chayim is intrinsically muksa, but it's not a base because they go in and out. And so far, any other solution doesn't justify. So the final one will work. Islay beitzas efrayach. That you have a unhatched egg. A unhatched egg is taka completely unusable because, as it is, a human is not going to eat it. It's already an embryo. I mean, if it has a bloodstrap, we're not allowed to eat it. We know that. Just a quick parenthesis, that the eggs that we have now is very different than the eggs that they had in the times of Chazal. Most of the eggs that we buy come from hens that had no roosters in their vicinity. And even though that the hen is going to lay the whole 21 days, and it's like a factory, it keeps on laying eggs day and night, there's a cheshbon how many days it takes for it to go through the pipeline. But if it's only warmed by the earth, which is what happens now, then the blood, if you find blood, is only yasin midrabanan. And not only that, you only need to remove the blood drop. The whole egg is not problematic. Even, I know here today in Los Angeles, the bakeries with the best achshedim, I don't think they check the eggs anymore. Very alike, not that many years ago. When we were younger, you were mechuyev to check the eggs because there was a problem of a doiraisa. Now, so let's go back over here. Here we're speaking about an egg that began to develop. That egg is asun midoiraisa for a person to eat. And furthermore, an animal, they don't eat an egg when it's in a shell, the mitzias. And these chicken coops also would have a beitzas afroich. They would have an egg that's already in the middle of its development. That's a common thing. That is inherently unfit. Inherently unfit, we're saying even Rab Shimon is moided, there's mutzat. Perfect. And that's why Rabbi Yechanan can paskin like Rab Shimon, and this chicken coop is a basis for the beitzas afroich. Everything works. And now the Gemara says that Kiyasa, Rabbi Yitzchak, Bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, after all the above, we had the Rabbi Yitzchak, he came to Babel, that we're trying to figure out, based on the presumption that Rabbi Yechanan says, Amru, that he agrees on, it works. It doesn't contradict. Even Rab Shimon will be more than the portable chicken coop. Now, Poyel Mamish, we have a quotation from the Yid, from Rabbi Yitzchak, that came from the Holy Land, that says that Rabbi Yochanan paskins like Rabbi Yehuda. However, Rabbi Shimon Levi Yoma, not like Rabbi Yochanan, halacha ki Rabbi Shimon. So Kiosa Rabbi Yosef, Omar Rabbi Yosef, I'll tell you more than that. Hainu da Omar Rabbi Bar Bar Chana. Even before that information, when we kept on quoting the statement in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Yochanan said, Amru means they said means they said halacha ki Rabbi Shimon. Adarabba. When a posek is not saying halacha ki Rabbi Shimon, when Rabbi Yochanan says Amru, you know what that means? It means I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. Amru, they say delay, loisi delay. Now you don't even need to have this. First of all, the fact is that a chicken coop has also these embryos that are in middle of being developed. So the reality is that even according to Rab Shimon, a chicken coop becomes a basis, and therefore it's muksa while the beitzas efroyach is in it. Because there's another detail that according to Rab Shimon, when something is a basis, it's only muksa while it's a basis. Rab Shimon doesn't agree, like we began today's shir, to the concept of nigud iskatzoy lebein hashmashes iskatzoy lekuliyayim. So the psak of Rabbi Yochanan will fit even with Rab Shimon. But really now we have two opinions as to what is the shita of Rabbi Yochanan. So Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Today, Rebbe and Rabbi Yochanan, the Gemara doesn't conclude. We don't know. Adarabba, not only we don't know, but at least we're quoting from Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Faket, that Rabbi Yochanan paskins, halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda. Chevra, we'll stop over here. God willing, to be continued. Now, Chevra, what we're going to do is like this, is that we already have Daf Mem Vav. I shared the whole Daf Mem Vav today. The ikar that just to know already for tomorrow is that the Gemara concludes on the end of Daf Mem Vav Amid Beis, that the reason why Rab Shimon does not allow for us to move the nair while it's burning, is because it's a basis. It's a basis for the nair. If not for the basis issue, Shema Yechaba doesn't work according to Rab Shimon. We're going to start, God willing, tomorrow on Daf Mem Zayin, 2 lines from the top of the Amid, and we're going to learn the last daf that we need to learn in Masechta Shabbos. It's also going to be a very small daf. Maybe we'll even begin Sanhedrin. Maybe I'll tell you if the first daf in Sanhedrin is very small, then maybe we'll just start 10 minutes earlier. But the last daf in Shabbos will be Daf Mem Zayin, and in Sanhedrin we owe 10 daf from Daf Nun Ches until Daf Samach Ches. V'loy ad b'chlal. It's 10 daf. All right, Chevra, to be continued.
Thank you, everything.